There's a perpetual debate on the various fields of human expertise. We can simplify it into two sides. On one hand, we have the technological, the scientific fields, and then on the other hand, we have the humanities, the arts, philosophy. And what I find interesting is that if you hear the reasoning from of the side of the humanities or the arts, what is frequently said or how it's frequently described is its essential quality in human experience, in human life. That we do art, we make art, we engage in literature, we are educated in the humanities, we do philosophy because these tell us what it means to be a human being, or these embody the essence of human existence. And yet, at the same time, when we're dealing about it in terms of its place in institutions, for example, in education or in politics, it often tries to come in forms of its usefulness. So it begins with the primary argument that these things, the arts, the humanities, philosophy, literature, narrative stories, they're essential to human life. But at the same time, that kind of argument doesn't seem to be enough. And so we go on to the other level of, so what are the uses of these fields? And so we read various articles which are good and very much interesting, talking about how philosophy helps students think more clearly, helps people uh, engage more wisely with whatever they're engaging with, or how exposure to art is positively beneficial emotionally and psychologically to humans or whatever species, how music is has these various benefits, how knowing stories help you gain various skills. And I believe that those all are true, and I agree with all of those. But I think it's another point to consider why such an argument as these things are essential to human life seemingly insufficient. And so there are various possibilities if we try to approach it in a general logical analysis. That if our premise is that these fields are essential to human life, essential to human existence, and that kind of premise is insufficient, then it could either be that one, it's not essential to human life, they are not essential to human life, or two, that there's a lack of consensus on this essence of human life. Let's start with number two. So, I thought of the lack of consensus because generally, how that kind of debate goes is that those people on the side of the humanities, of the arts, carry this intuitive understanding almost of this essence of human existence. That's why we have this idea of art for art's sake, of learning for learning's sake. That someone, a human being, finds pleasure, satisfaction in doing or in engaging in these fields for the sake of engagement. And I think that kind of humanities for humanity's sake is what embodies that idea of essence, of an essential characteristic to life. That if something is truly essential, then it should be enough to do them for their own sake without having to rationalize, to reason out why, to explain pros and cons of these various fields, to describe the skills that you get, regardless of how accurate or how good those things sound. When we speak of essence, especially essence to existence, that concept itself should weigh enough, should be foundational enough that it can overpower all the other merits possible. But philosophers, artists, those in the humanities might say that, and yet having to go to the other side, in the technological scientific side, there then comes that question of, so what are the benefits of doing all of this? What are the uses of doing all of these things? And while I think the reason why such conversations come up, such ways of proposing ideas such as seeing the benefits of humanities, for example, or the benefits of art comes up, is obvious. The we can consider the scientific, the technological fields to function more as this kind of structure in which there's a focus on clear delineation of binaries of goods and bads. But still, what that may mean is, if what's essential on one side cannot carry or cannot be brought to the other side, then does that mean that there are two kinds of essences? That if this one claims to have grasped the essence or an essence of human existence, where then is that essence on this other side? And so one might think then, again, on a simple logical analysis, that if the essences between these two fields or these two categories of human expertise, of human fields, differ, then would there be different human essences then? And I think I found that a funny way to think about things. Yeah, of a different human essence. Surely humans are, as with every organism in the species, are unique in and of themselves. But doesn't it make sense that because we can be considered as one human existence, that there's something essential inherent in all of us, in the same way as we can confidently say that there's something essentially the same amongst all trees. That's why we call them trees. So trees may vary in different ways, but there's something essential to the treeness that makes one thing a tree and another thing as not a tree. So in the same way, when we say that these are human beings, then we're saying that there's something essentially human inherent in them, in all of them. That's why they can be considered as human beings. Unless the kind of categorization we've been functioning on for the longest time is that there are all of these non-human beings, and then everything else, no matter how different they are in essence, are the human beings. It doesn't linguistically doesn't make sense, and logically it's a bit too complex. If you follow the principle that the simplest way of looking at things is probably closer to the truth, then that's probably not the case, right? And so we move on to the other side. On the Again, we started with the idea that maybe there are different human essences, that some people have the arts, the humanities, philosophies as inherent in their human existence, and some people don't. And because essentially they are different, the beings on both sides. But then, as I've tried to show in that simple analysis, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. That surely people would have their uniqueness, their differences. But if we're talking about human essence, it should be a foundational human essence that is equal, available, inherent to all. So maybe we can look at another way of seeing this problem, or proving that the humanities or the arts are essential. The other question, which is that, are these things, arts, humanities, philosophy, literature, truly essential? That maybe the question isn't that there are different human essences. Does it make sense? As human beings, there's one human essence. But that maybe it's fundamentally flawed to say that these fields are essential to human existence. Maybe that is the case. And my theory is that it's not true. Because if something is not essential, then that means it can be eradicated. And I think there's been a lot of points throughout history in which there seems to be a risk of eradicating arts, literature, humanities, philosophy. Various ways, various institutions, various systems have tried to eradicate it or change it. But from what I can see, a lot of it has remained the same. Has been sustained and persisted. That though art has changed and has developed various forms and have used different mediums, we still have art. There are still artists. People are still making art. That no matter how bad the economy gets, no matter how fraught the artist's life gets, people are still making art. Same with literature. Humans have been sharing stories ever since. Humans will continue to share stories no matter how poor the literacy rate is, or how weak people's linguistic capabilities are. And I think the same would apply to philosophy. Socrates was killed, but was sentenced to death even. But there's still philosophy up to now. We still talk about his ideas. we still try to develop these systems. At the same time, if we look at other fields that depend on ideas of utility and pros and cons, cost benefits, we see that a lot of them have changed, evolved, and have found their end, the end to their use. That one time and at some time before we've needed certain fields, and then another time we don't anymore. And that's just how technology develops. That's just how the scientific field develops. And that isn't to say that that makes them any less than the fields of art, of humanities. But I think what this goes to show is that there's probably merit in looking at things based on how essential they are to human life without having to succumb to the frameworks of costs and benefits, of pros and cons. And at the same time, looking at it through pros and cons may not be as foolproof as they seem. Yes. Yeah, that's it for this evening's reflection. Well, quick lesson as I continue reading on P4C, Philosophy for Children, and its relation to Paul Ricoeur's work. Yeah, thank you.